Hello guys, this video is designed to work in conjunction with part one. I did a video called Paper 2 Part 1, just going through the format of the paper and how to approach the different questions. In this video I'd like to go over some of the key terms that are likely to crop up in section A, how to deal with them, what they mean, and you can use this over and over again. You can pause me and make notes. Rewind me, pause me, make some flashcards out of the key terms if you want. I'll also give you hints and tips on where to look on YouTube for other more kind of polished high production videos that you can use for revision. But the first section of paper 2, when you get given the clip, it's likely to ask you a number of things, and the key words that they use in the questions are vital to being able to access the questions. If there's a question that crops up that you're not sure of, it can put you into a bit of a panic in the exam. If you're not quite sure what it means, you won't feel as confident answering the question. So it's a good job to get those solid. When you open that paper, you've got 2 minutes to look at the questions before you see the clip. So you're looking for keywords. So what they could ask you about is cinematography. Now, when they refer to cinematography, it's basically an umbrella term, a catch-all term for anything like camera shots, camera angles, camera movement, anything to do with where the camera's placed, how it uses framing and composition, which is how the camera frames the subject, how an image is composed. Often when people think of composition, they think automatically of music, as if they're a composer or as there's a composition of music. It doesn't necessarily mean that in media. It means how that shot has been composed, whether the characters are in the centre of the frame, whether they're to the left, to the right, to the top third, to the bottom third, or the centre third of the frame. And that's when we refer to the rule of thirds. And if you take photography, you'll know more about this, but basically you can segment any image into 9 squares, into thirds, and the way the image is composed is to do with those thirds. So you can think of anything cut into kind of sections, and a subject will either be in the centre of the frame, or it will be to the right or to the left of the frame, to the top, to the bottom. Usually, most characters are framed centrally, or if there's a conversation between 2 characters, they're on the left and the right. And that's kind of like your rule. But that doesn't always apply, and with His Dark Materials, sometimes they play around with how things are composed or framed for different reasons. So cinematography is camera angles and camera shot types. So shot types are like your establishing shot that is there to establish the scene, set the scene for the audience. They might refer to a long shot where you can see the whole character's body from their head to their toes. You might get a cowboy shot, which is from the top of the character's head down to their waist, just below their waist. There's a medium shot, there's a medium close-up shot. A close-up shot might just be of a character's head. You might have an extreme close-up where you just see someone's eyes or mouth or a certain object. We often call these insert shots. So in His Dark Materials, for example, you might see a shot of a conversation, then it might cut to a particular object, like a really extreme close-up of an object. We sometimes call those insert shots to kind of link an image or an item to a conversation. So that's camera shot types. Studio Binder does a brilliant job of breaking down all of the different shot types, so you know exactly what they're called, how to identify them, and how you would write about them. I'll give you a link to that in the comments of this video so you can easily navigate that, but Studio Binder is the one. Camera angles, you either have a kind of high angle shot looking down at a subject, making them either look smaller and inferior, or kind of isolated and weak, or a low angle shot looking up at a character to make them look bigger and more dominant, so they fill the frame a bit more. You can have a Dutch tilt, or sometimes called a canted angle, where the camera tilts slightly and kind of makes you feel a bit queasy and off kilter. Either of those terms can apply. So that's camera angles. It's like you can have a subtle low angle or a subtle high angle, and that changes people's perceptions of a character. Camera movements, it's worth going through. So you see very few camera movements in Doctor Who. That's because of budget restrictions. They had usually one camera that was very heavy, 1960s camera that's fixed in one position, very hard to move it around, very heavy piece of equipment. So you tend to have static shots in Doctor Who where the camera is set up, they call action and then they shoot that scene and then cut to another scene. His Dark Materials, you tend to see a bit more camera movement because they've got a higher budget to spend. It's a much more modern series. There's lighter equipment where they can use different camera moving equipment. So the main camera movements, and again, Studio Binder is a great place for this. Camera movements are like pans. If you were to keep the camera in a particular axis and just pan the camera like you would with your phone, that's a pan. You can tilt the camera up and down on an axis, so you can look up and down with the camera whether it stays still. You can arc with the camera, so the camera can actually move around a track, around a subject, around a character. Other movements you see in His Dark Materials, you tend to get boom shots sometimes where the camera is on a kind of moving boom, almost like a drone shot that tracks a character through a corridor. You can track a character forward and backwards, so the camera can move backwards as the character moves towards the camera, or forwards. You can also truck with the camera, where you move the camera completely sideways to track, say, a character running down a corridor or running through a different scene. I always imagine that as sort of following, like a linesman's job on a football match, following a player down the pitch, looking sideways as you go. You can have a boom shot, where the camera kind of moves up and down, doesn't necessarily tilt, but it moves up and down, goes up and down to track character's movement or to show something else in the scene. But there are a number of camera movements. Now, shot types, shot angles, camera movement all comes under the category of cinematography. So if you ever see that long word cinematography, it basically means all of those things. Now, another catch-all term that they often use is mise-en-scène, which is a kind of French term to mean everything you see in the scene. So if you get a question about mise-en-scène, and it's come up before, of course, but anything to do with mise-en-scène is the setting, the colour scheme, like colour palette, colours that are used in that shot. It can refer to the saturation of the colour, so you can get like a drained, faint colour, or it can be a very deep colour. Lots of colour is to do with saturation, high or low. It's to do with the costumes worn by the characters. It's to do with the props used on set. It's everything you see. It can be to do with the kind of proximity of the characters. Sometimes it's overlapped a little bit with cinematography, but if you've got two characters very close, as if they're about to either kiss or have some sort of argument, we'd call that proxemics. So characters are either very close in terms of their proximity or proxemics, or they can be far away. You could take that to the extreme and have two characters, hundreds of meters apart, all in one shot. That's to do with framing and composition, but also partly to do with mise-en-scène. The time of the day would define the kind of lighting that's used in that shot. So it could be a sunset shot, sunrise, midday, and the type of lighting that you see, natural lighting, artificial lighting, will set the scene. That's all part of the mise-en-scène. So mise-en-scène is just a catch-all term for everything you see, basically, in that frame. Other terms they can use, they can refer to narrative. So anything to do with narrative, it's the same in English. Narrative just means a story. So narratives usually follow what's called a narrative arc from start to finish. Now, a play can have a narrative arc that might go across 3 or 5 acts. Something like Macbeth follows a narrative arc. You could be asked about action codes. So when you see something happen, or a character says, let's go there, that's an action code because you know some action is going to take place to take characters from one place to another. So you see or hear action codes where that kind of denotes a change. Or you get enigma codes, and quite often they like asking about enigma codes. What is an enigma code? Well, an enigma code, just like the Enigma machine, was designed to crack mysteries, crack codes. So an enigma code is a little mystery. So if a character is talking about something and then you get an insert shot to an item, but you don't know what that item is, that object is, That could be an Enigma code because it makes you think, what's that? Are they going to use that later? What's that used for? What's it made of? Does it have magic powers? What's it made of? That's an Enigma code. Any mystery that makes you think what's going to happen next or makes you intrigued is an Enigma code. They could ask you about the editing, so how one shot goes from one to another and how there are transitions between the shots. So more often than not, you see a straight cuts between shots, and that happens to kind of move the narrative forwards, and what we call continuity editing, where one shot follows another shot and it continues like that. Most things you see in film and TV use what we call continuity editing, that just follows a very linear, very straightforward path from start to finish. You might have, similar to English, you might have a flashback. Now these aren't used really that much in Doctor Who. They are used slightly in His Dark Materials, like in what you might call in English an analepsis, where it flashes back. Now you could refer to that as non-linear editing. So the editing's not going from point A to point B in a linear way. It's flashing back and jumping around. And that's what we might call a non-linear narrative, where you're jumping around in the character's mind. They might think back to a previous scene. So they could ask you about editing. They could ask you about the sound used. Now, often overlooked sound. So there's roughly two types of sound. You get the diegetic sound that takes place in the scene, characters talking to one another, ruffling of clothes, ruffling of movement of the props, smashing glass, anything that you can see happening in the scene is diegetic sound. Non-diegetic sound is any sound that's been added to the clip. So if I were to film this now and add a soundtrack, the soundtrack isn't taking place in this scene. No one's playing the music behind me. I'm adding that to the clip. So I'm editing that in post-edit, or what we call post-production. And that's what we call non-diegetic sound, any sound that's been put in over the top. So soundtrack and audio files are used more in His Dark Materials. There's more music used, and that's diegetic sound. Now, soundtrack can build in volume, it can build in intensity, and we might call that a crescendo to kind of build the music up to some sort of point of action, or the sound might diminish in sound. It might decrease in volume and intensity, and we call that diminuendo. But they are two kind of more musical terms. If you could remember that there's one term for increase, we could call it increasing intensity, crescendo, diminishing or decreasing in intensity, diminuendo. But they are terms that you can get around not using them if you can't remember them in the exam, but they are your kind of key terms. So sound is quite crucial in building atmosphere, and that roughly is the sort of things you're likely to get asked. Shot types, camera movement, shot angles, mise-en-scène, positioning of characters, and why it's all been used. Remember, anything you see or hear is not by accident. It's purely deliberate. It's been deliberated, it's been planned, it's been shot in a particular way for a reason. It wants to get a reaction from us, the audience. So it's been designed in a particular way. Now, you'll see hundreds of minutes, hours worth of content on television, film, YouTube. Everything's been designed in a certain way. I've framed this shot behind me in a particular way. I've put myself in the centre of the frame. I've put the camera more or less at eye level, so I'm talking directly to you. It's all been designed for a particular reason or aesthetic. Aesthetic is the way a shot looks. So those are the sorts of key terms. I'll make sure you've got loads of links to other useful videos and channels. I will do another video on Doctor Who and His Dark Materials, and another video on newspapers shortly.